Hey, it's Alex from Android Central, and this is the Xperia Z3 Plus, the latest high-end phone from Sony. Before you've even opened the box, the name tells you a lot about this phone. Compared to last year, which gave us the Xperia Z2 and Z3, this isn't really positioned as a full upgrade beyond the last generation. But let's start at the beginning. This is clearly a Sony phone with the most refined version of the company's omni-balanced design language to date. There's very little to distract you from the big 5.2-inch 1080p display on the front, just two sheets of glass front and back, and a metal trim along the sides. The screen looks great. You don't get the insane pixel density of some rivals, but the colours are bright and vivid without looking overblown, and the display is easy to see in direct sunlight too. Either side of the screen you'll find front-facing speakers tucked between the glass and the metal trim. They are reasonably loud and clear, though they do lack the bass of HTC's boom sound. Some of the visual craft has been reduced as well. There's only one plastic flap on the side now, which houses a combined microSD and nano SIM slot. The micro USB port has been moved down below without any protective cover of its own. That's significant because the Z3 Plus is still water and dust resistant, rated IP65 and 68, which itself is a big deal because no other phone maker is doing water resistance as standard anymore. All the major buttons, including the stylized power key and dedicated camera shutter button, live along the right edge, and around the back the camera sits flush with the rear glass. And that's really all there is to the design. It's simple and elegant without being too overthought, and incredibly thin and light at just 6.9mm and 144 grams, and it looks and feels great. On the inside, the Z3 Plus runs a Snapdragon 810 processor, a chip which, for better or worse, has developed a reputation for kicking out a bit more heat than perhaps it should. We've seen it previously in the HTC One M9 and LG G Flex 2, and we've seen that it's powerful but also power hungry. The same applies to Sony's new flagship. It'll deliver all the power you need, but it can get a little toasty, more so than its predecessor, the Z3, and in some cases that's a problem. Right now, the camera app is plagued by temperature warnings and even outright app shutdowns when the temperature gets too high. And that gets even worse when you use any of Sony's augmented reality features. The company says an update is coming to address this issue, but in the meantime, the camera experience is a little compromised, and that's directly because of the thermal issues. In fact, the way Sony's managing its Snapdragon 810 in general is a little unusual. As standard, it only uses two of its high-power Cortex A57 cores in addition to all four A53s, as opposed to other phones which keep all 8 active at the same time. As far as we can tell, only certain apps and tasks like the camera and parts of some benchmark apps will cause all the CPU cores to become active at the same time. Regardless, this isn't a slow phone, and we noticed only minor performance fluctuations in a week of testing. Whatever issues may lurk behind the scenes, this still feels like a fast device. As for the camera hardware, Sony's sticking with a 20.7 megapixel exmor RS sensor behind an f2.0 Sony G lens. This is the same setup we saw on the Xperia Z3, and with a faster CPU and a few months of software enhancements, it's still a pretty good camera phone. The ceiling for image quality isn't anywhere near the current Android leaders though. The LG G4 and Samsung Galaxy S6 are much better, but generally speaking the superior auto mode will take most scenes and turn them into a good looking JPEG. And the fact that it shoots oversampled 8 megapixel images by default means that you've got some leeway to zoom in without losing detail. More advanced settings including stabilization, HDR, ISO and EV controls are available in the dedicated manual shooting mode. Around the front there's an upgraded 5 megapixel camera for selfies, and Sony's loadout of AR features now lets you combine faces in real time with hilarious and often terrifying results. As Sony enters the lollipop era, we're seeing software on Sony phones moving closer to Google's vision of the OS. The Xperia Z3 software will be familiar to anyone who's used a lollipop-upgraded Z2 or Z3. The Sony skin, if you can call it that, is pretty lightweight these days, and Sony hasn't messed with the underlying look and feel of Android. You still get the extensive theming engine to customize the phone however you like, but by default it's not a million miles away from vanilla Android. Of course, the bundled Sony apps, refreshed as they are to incorporate some material design elements, are all about tying you into Sony's ecosystem. The PlayStation and PSN apps are preloaded, and you'll get a download prompt for the PS4 Remote Play app when you fire them up. As we've seen on the Xperia Z3, the ability to stream games from your PS4 to your phone with an attached controller could be a big reason for PS4 owners to buy a Sony phone. Elsewhere, you're looking at Play Memory support baked into the album app for photo storage, PlayStation Video support in the video player, and Spotify connected to the Music app since Sony shut down its own Music Unlimited service earlier in the year. Of course, all of Google's apps come preloaded too, and if you're not big on getting all your entertainment and cloud storage from Sony, this stuff is pretty easy to ignore. On the inside, there's a 2930 mAh fixed battery, down from 3100 mAh in the Z3, and with it the battery life has taken a predictable hit. You'll still get a full day of use pretty easily, and by and large it matches the battery life of other Android flagships. Plus, Sony offers a bunch of software features like Stamina Mode, which cuts down on background data usage to save power. But we can't help but be disappointed that Sony's no longer offering superlative battery life like it did in the Xperia Z3. Whatever Sony's marketing might say, this isn't a two-day phone in the same way the Z3 was. And that last thought actually applies to much of the phone in general. The Z3 Plus isn't a bad handset, but it's hard to recommend when there's really not much it does better than its predecessor. Sony hasn't upgraded its main camera hardware, it's actually downgraded the battery, and on top of that you'll have to deal with the phone's thermal issues, at least for the moment. In fact, the biggest problem for the Z3 Plus is the fact that the Z3 still exists, is cheaper, and does a bunch of things at least as well as the newer model. That's why, as good as it is, the Z3 Plus is tough to recommend, and Sony fans should probably think about skipping this generation. For more on the Sony Xperia Z3 Plus, check out our full review on AndroidCentral.com.